Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark. We are in 1 Samuel chapter 2. We're going to be starting in verse 19 this lesson. But before we begin, Jeremiah 15:16, Thy words were found, and I did eat them, and thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now, we're continuing on here in 1 Samuel 2, verse 19, where Samuel is being discussed. And verse 18 says, But Samuel ministered before the Lord, being a child, girded with a linen ephod. Now, we start this lesson in verse 19, and it says, Moreover, his mother made him a little coat, and brought it to him from year to year, when she came up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. Now, the Hebrew word for coat means a robe. It's a kind of long tunic. It goes probably from the shoulders all the way down to the ankles. Now, this same Hebrew word is used to describe clothing that was worn by kings in 1 Chronicles chapter 15, verse 27. Also worn by prophets in 1 Samuel 15, verse 27. And by the high priest in Exodus chapter 28 and verse 31, chapter 29 verse 5, and chapter 39 verse 22. So this robe here that's being talked about, that Samuel is being given by his mother, is the same kind of robe that kings and prophets and the high priest would wear. Because Samuel was starting his ministry to the Lord at such a young age, and because there was no specific instructions from God about clothing worn by so young of a priest, it seems that Hannah was making Samuel a kind of ephod to wear. She would bring one every year because Samuel was a growing boy. So she would bring one to him, and he had clothing every year. Hophni and Phinehas were clothed with garments that were specifically designed by God to show a representation of God. Samuel is clothed yearly by custom-made clothes sewn by his loving and praying mother. So here you have the two opposites. You got Hophni and Phinehas, and their priests, and they're wearing the clothes that God designed, the clothes that God told Moses how to make them. But here's little Samuel, and they're as far from God as anything. On the outside, they look like God's representatives. But here's little Samuel. He's just wearing a little ephod, a little robe that his mother made for him, a mother who prayed for him and desired him from God. Clothing can either hide or reveal our true identity. The selfish, wicked sons of Eli looked like true priests of God, but they were utterly abominable to God on the inside. They were definitely wolves in sheep's clothing. Samuel looked like a simple boy wearing handmade imitation priest's clothes from his mother. Yet, on the inside, he was growing up to be the priest that would represent God to the nation. So here it's not all. Here we have we have John the Baptist. Oh yeah, John the Baptist was, Jesus said, there hasn't been a prophet ever in the history of the world. There has been no prophet like John the Baptist. Oh yeah, and guess what he was wearing? Oh yep, he was wearing camel's hair, eating locusts and wild honey. Sometimes we can't judge a book by its cover. And in this case, it's absolutely true. The difference between Hophni and Phinehas and what they looked like, and the difference between Samuel also and what he looked like. But yet Samuel was God's man. People have a tendency to look on someone's outward appearance and be influenced by it. John the Baptist, he wore camel's hair, goat skin, and some of the disciples were wearing fishing clothes. Remember, God only sees the heart. God is the only one who can see the heart. This is why we need to pray for God's guidance when choosing someone for a position in the church. Choosing a superintendent, choosing a pastor, choosing an elder or a deacon. Human beings, we have a tendency to look on the outside because that's really all we can see. God sees the heart. This is why much prayer needs to go into the decision that we make before we make a decision to choose someone for an elder or a deacon or a Sunday school teacher, Sunday school superintendent, or an outreach leader, whatever, music leader. Why? God sees the heart. Verses 20 and 21, and Eli blessed Elkanah and his wife, and said, The Lord give thee seed of this woman for the loan which is lent to the Lord. And they went unto their home. And the Lord visited Hannah, so that she conceived, and she bare 3 sons and 2 daughters. And the child Samuel grew before the Lord. Now, I think the timing of these 2 verses takes place at the sacrifice in which Elkanah and Hannah dedicated Samuel to the sanctuary when he was only about 3 years old. So this, when it says here in verse 20, and Eli blessed Elkanah and his wife, I think that blessing took place when they offered Samuel dedicated him to the temple of God at that time. Eli's blessing reveals that Samuel was not looked upon as a burden to the sanctuary, but he was looked upon as a great gift. God responds to Hannah's gift given to him by giving Hannah back 5 more children. Now listen, no one is going to outgive God. That's just the way it is. No one's going to outgive God. And Hannah, from the moment she prayed, she was going to give this child back to God. She did it right away. As soon as she had the opportunity, she did it. And when she gave that child to God, God gave her more back. God is not going to be outgived by anybody. It would also be that in the coming years, as Hannah and Elkanah would go to Shiloh for the yearly sacrifice, that they would bring a new brother or a new sister up with them to meet their who? Big brother. That's right, Samuel. So I'm sure Samuel kind of was like, well, Mom and Dad are coming this year. They should be here in about a month. I'm wondering if they're going to bring another brother or sister with them. Yeah, but that's what happened. Samuel would have an opportunity to see his new family members. So here Hannah and Elkanah would bring their children, their new children, from Hannah up to Shiloh for the yearly sacrifice, and Samuel would have a chance to see his new brother or sister. And it says here in verses 20 and 21 that Samuel grew before the Lord. Now, not only physically, but also in wisdom and in the knowledge of God's ways. This would require Samuel to know and to memorize all the different requirements for the offerings of God. Also, all the laws of purification and what causes things that cause defilement. So Samuel has to do a lot of studying, a lot of book reading, and to know the laws and what sacrifices belong to different people, whether they're rich people or poor people, and all the different things in the law. He would either have his own copy of the law, or he would use probably the one that belonged to Eli, which was basically the temple's copy. So Eli has a copy of the law, and in these years that he's growing up, he has to spend a lot of time studying the law. Now, in verses 22 to 25, we have Eli rebukes his sons. Now, we'll get into that next lesson. Eli rebukes his sons, right? But until then, walk with the Lord. I know he walks with you.